Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gruff Talk, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. Well, I'm really excited about today's show because it's all about sleep. Yes, sleep, truly one of the most underrated and misunderstood tools we have to age better. So listen, back in 2010, when my first book came out, I included good information about sleep. At least I thought it was good, but it was almost like an afterthought. Since then, so much incredibly scientific research has been done on the very power of sleep that my last book, published in 2018, had a very lengthy, detailed chapter devoted to sleep and how it can help keep a lot of chronic and common diseases at bay, regulate hormones, keep the immune system strong, help with weight control, and super important, help fight against dementia. And new research has just emerged that sleep deprivation can hurt your heart. And this is something I'll be discussing with my guest today. Before we start the episode, I want to thank you for sending in your questions and comments and ideas for future episodes. Keep sending them to grufftalkpodcast@gmail.com. So let's just take a little trip down memory lane for a minute. Remember those nights long ago, rolling into bed after 2 a.m., maybe after a night of discoing, and then lingering in blissful sleep until noon. Remember that, when you could actually do that? And then, I don't know about you, but when my eyes finally fluttered open, I'd yawn, stretch, and maybe turn over for a little more shut-eye. But all that changed. Well, a lot of it changed once I had kids and became a real adult, but all that really changed once I hit 50 and was postmenopausal. Now, sleep can be hard work. Most nights, I try everything in my power not to wake up at 3 a.m. And when that fails, I just hope to slip back into unconsciousness for a little longer. But I know it won't last. Even on weekends, my eyelids pop open at 5:30 a.m., no matter how dark it is outside or how tired I am. But the more research I do on sleep, the more I have become a super sleep advocate. It's the third pillar of overall health and well-being, along with exercise and eating right foods. But at least that's what I used to say. However, our guest today kind of steered me in a different direction. And he says it's the fourth pillar, actually the first pillar of four, because he thinks it's super important. You're going to love him. Dr. Azizi Seixas is an associate professor of behavioral health and psychology at the Miller School of Medicine at the University of Miami. And he's also the founding director of the Media and Innovation Laboratory and associate director of the Center for Translational Sleep and Circadian Sciences. Dr. Seixas is one of the world's most recognized voices in sleep health and the critical connection between sleep and chronic disease. Right after this short break, Dr. Seixas and I will talk through why sleep is so important and how you can get more of it. Stay tuned. Welcome to Gruff Talk, Dr. Seixas.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me.
So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. And we were talking a little bit offline before we hit the record button about how important sleep is. And in fact, I made the comment that, this is so great because I want everyone to really understand that sleep is considered the third pillar of overall health and well-being. And you said, well, why don't you just tell us what you told me? I found that very interesting. Please.
Well, Barbara, I would never try to disagree with you on your own show. But I think it's important that, no problem, I think, hopefully I'll be invited again. I think it's important that your audience knows that, that there are other health behaviors that are critical. So what we oftentimes say is that there are 4 pillars of health, particularly from a lifestyle and behavioral standpoint. They include sleep, diet, physical activity and exercise, and stress management. And we ultimately believe that sleep is the most primordial and foundational. And the reason why is because research has shown that all of those other three health behaviors and lifestyle activities emanate from sleep. Let me explain. So your diet and the food choices and your ability to metabolize these foods have a lot to do with the amount of sleep and the quality of sleep. And everything operates in a timed way. So we have this thing called a circadian biology. And it's really important for us to understand when is the right time to actually eat and to process foods and the like. And so if you don't want to eat carbohydrates or high caloric foods too close to bed. And so in many ways, there have been several studies that have shown that sleep significantly impacts also your gut microbiota. Everyone is into, understanding that they have probiotics and to ensure that your gut health is at its tip-top shape. However, sleep in many ways serves as that one activity that in many ways sets the right environment, the terroir, I would call it. Your gut is like that fine wine. You can grow grapes in Italy or grow it elsewhere, but the grapes grown in Italy will taste better, will produce better wine. And that's how your gut microbiota works in many ways. And sleep helps to ensure that your environment in your gut is conducive to optimal metabolism and natural gut health, but that significantly impacts brain health and other general health. Sleep significantly impacts your physical activity and exercise, your energy levels and activities. And so when we know that individuals, and studies have shown that individuals who exercise a lot and don't get adequate sleep compared to those individuals who exercise moderately but get good sleep, those individuals who sleep well and get moderate exercise get the best health benefits out of their exercise as compared to those individuals who exercise a lot and don't get enough sleep. And so there are lots of physiological mechanisms that explain that. It helps in terms of your body recuperation. So when you've done very grueling exercise, like you go for a run and you do a 3-5 mile run, that your muscles need to recuperate, your cells need to replenish. And so sleep helps and aids with that. And then lastly, sleep significantly impacts your ability to modulate your emotions and to deal with stress. And stress in many ways, we're not making it seem that it's an emotional thing, because I have to be very cognizant of the audience as well. So I'm not talking, stress management, that you are unable to manage your stress, but how do you deal with external factors that may have an impact on you internally? And I think that is very critical. So it's been shown individuals who get more sleep are less likely to be irritable, less likely to have emotional distress. We have a ton of papers in that. And so the point I'm trying to make to your audience is that when you're looking at these 4 pillars of health, sleep, physical activity, diet, and stress management, that sleep sits at the center of it. And I just shared with you studies that have shown how without sleep, those different health behaviors and activities do not work optimally to promote good health and wellness.
That was really incredible. And I first learned about the connection between sleep and adequate sleep and the gut microbiome about 3 months ago, when I had an expert on the gut microbiome from the University of Washington on the show talking about this. So I learned a great deal, but it's wonderful to hear you underscore this important connection. And also, I'm really curious, you just mentioned the connection between food and the gut microbiome. So what is your view of something like intermittent fasting and sleep? I'm a believer in it for some people. I don't think it works for everyone. And there are different ways, as we all know, how, to do intermittent fasting, the window or several days or what have you. But what do you think the connection is between sleep and intermittent fasting? Can you tell us?
Sure. Let me lay this out from a circadian standpoint. So most of your audience might say no more scientific language or jargony terms, but your body in many ways operates on what I call your circadian biology, your 24-hour clock. And it is important that everything works in a timely manner. So, for example, there's a time when your body metabolizes foods much more optimally than other times. There's a specific time when you can get the most health benefits out of your exercise and the like. And so all of that works on a clockwork in many ways. And so this particular clock, there's several clocks in our bodies. The primary clock is what we call the master clock, which is in our brains. That sends different hormones, different signals throughout our bodies, communicating with your organs, with your tissues and your cells, which all have their own clocks as well. And they all communicate. Everything is like on a clockwork. It's like a symphony. They all know when they have to play. And so, in many ways, our circadian biology is that, gear clock system. Everything is in sync. And once that gets out of whack, then that's where we start to have some significant issues. Now, as it relates to gut microbiota and sleep, how does sleep impact that? Well, one thing is critical that we need to be aware of is that there's certain bacteria and enzymes that work on that clock as well. And so sleep helps to entrain the system to work in this unified way. Once it gets derailed, then the body in and of itself has to make some significant compensatory kind of choices in order to ensure that is in sync. So I will say this in a different way. Some people may ask, why is it that they need to sleep? What's the importance of sleep?
Mm-hmm.
And what we know thus far, and I think it's still enigmatic, so we're still finding out more things, that we sleep for many different reasons. First of which is it helps to create what we call a kind of an equilibrium in your physiological and biological system. It helps to neutralize things. It's important because you don't want your blood pressure to be too elevated when it shouldn't be, and you don't need your glucose levels to be too elevated when it shouldn't, or your heart rate. Obviously, there are conditions in which those have to be elevated. So in many ways, your circadian rhythm helps to normalize all of those. And I think it is critical, though, that in order for sleep to really be fully understood, is that the first key thing is it helps to normalize that equilibrium. The second area, an important thing regarding sleep, is the fact that sleep helps to restore energy.
Mm-hmm.
So you're working. I oftentimes give the analogy that in many ways, your body is like a machine and it keeps on grinding and grinding. And your cells are like that. So if you've gone into any industrial factory, that you will see shavings of metal and debris and the like there, because that's just kind of the wear and tear. And that's what happens with our cells. When you have cellular death or cellular debris, and research has shown that sleep is the primary health behavior that helps to clear all of those debris out. This is where your lymphatic system works best. This is why sleep is important to overall immune health. Many studies have now shown from a brain health standpoint that, sleep is critical to potentially stave off Alzheimer's disease and dementia, because primarily sleep is that one critical area and activity that allows your body to vacuum, to clear your brain of that cellular debris from a daily activity. And so that's kind of the second area. And the third primary area that sleep is critical is that it helps with maintaining brain integrity and brain functioning. Integrity meaning the structure of your brain, because as you age, you naturally have certain masses of your brain, what we call deteriorate or get smaller because of the glucose that is pumping to your brain. But in sleep helps to maintain that because, in many ways, when you have a very well intact brain, that this will lend itself to greater cognitive functioning, or at least maintaining your cognitive functioning and overall brain health. And then it also helps in many ways from a brain standpoint with memory consolidation. And what does that mean? It means, therefore, that if you go through an entire day you're exposed to a wide variety of different activities, but you don't remember everything. So your brain acts as that computer that helps to file away important activities and connects it with previous memories so that it stitches together as a unified story. But not only does it help to file away memories and to connect them meaningfully, but it can also help to blunt or at least turn down the dial and the intensity of traumatic experiences, which is why oftentimes when you hear that statement, if you've had a bad day, your parents may say, you know what, don't worry, just sleep it off and everything will be good. That there's some grain of truth in that statement, that sleep has been shown to turn down that dial of intensity. So those are the three areas in which sleep can be helpful and how it can lead to greater health.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you just unpacked so much information, and I had so many thoughts as you were talking. You know, we started talking about referencing intermittent fasting and the gut microbiome and how that all kind of is impacted. But then I was also taken by your analogy of how the whole system working, not so much as the machine, but as that beautifully tuned orchestra. And so I'm thinking that sleep is like the conductor of it all, really kind of like if that's disrupted, if that conductor doesn't really know what's happening or know what to do or know what the next note is, that things can really start to fall apart very, very quickly.
Absolutely. And just to answer your question, squarely with regards to intermittent fasting. So I think the research is still blossoming as it relates to how sleep might impact intermittent fasting, because typically there has been several health benefits that people have reported and to have gained from intermittent fasting. So for example, I am currently doing it as well. I am one of those individuals where I'm on a 12-12 cycle or I'm on a 14-10 cycle. But what we do know is that it helps to promote good brain health. People feel as if that they're more cognitively alert and the like. It is still critical for us to still maintain good sleep. Why? Because they work hand in hand. So the key thing about intermittent fasting is not just the fasting, but it's how do you introduce food into your system. And so you can do intermittent fasting, but if you end up eating hamburgers, then obviously it's not a good choice, because in many ways you're giving your digestive system rest, but you're also trying to feed it with fuel, which is what food serves as. But what happens is that the sleep from the previous night helps to create or till that soil, gut microbiota flora, which is the walls of your gut and the like, to say, hey, how is it that I can feed my body the best fuel, right? Because here is it now, I am not stressing the body, I'm not stressing the digestive system, which is why people use intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And so sleep helps to normalize, neutralize, set that equilibrium that I mentioned previously, ensuring that you restore energy. And then in many ways, it helps to clean out all that debris. And the fasting period gives your body enough time to do that cleanse. Mm-hmm. And so that's where,
that's
two
where
go
the
hand in
benefits
hand.
come in. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what's so really fascinating to me personally is that when my first book came out about healthy aging in 2010,
wow, congrats.
I didn't mention intermittent fasting. It wasn't a thing to be discussed at that time. Of course, the research was going on at that time. Of course.
Yes.
We just didn't know about it. We layman people didn't know about it. I certainly did not. And as I recall very well, in that book, I made passing references to the importance of sleep, but not nearly enough. In the interim, my last book that came out went full hog into talking about intermittent fasting and all the benefits based on the work of Dr. Walter Longo, who I'm sure you're very familiar with, who I think really helped to popularize a lot of intermittent fasting programs here in the United States and also globally. But also, more importantly for this conversation, with my last book, I have rightly so, a whole chapter, a very detailed, lengthy chapter devoted to sleep and everything that it does. And of course, That was published in 2018. And since then, even more research has come out. It is fascinating. I mean, you mentioned also about how, when you're sleeping, the brain gets swept out, all the debris is swept out. Who knew? I mean, as you know, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, all the experts thought, nothing happening up there while they're just out. Nothing happening. Well, we know so much more now. It is amazing. And I agree with everything that you have said so far, how really sleep is it. I mean, it is the center of all of these. Yep.
That's a great point. And thank you so much for leading the charge in bringing very complex, oftentimes dense scientific literature to the public and making it very digestible. So I appreciate that. I think in many ways, I agree with you, but I would consider myself a humble scientist. So I don't think scientists in many ways can take all the credit here, because I think there are some people who have been leading these and living these lifestyles already in terms of intermittent fasting. I think what we have done is to put evidence to it to justify it. And we've seen more cases where it has been effective. But I think, to be quite honest, I think, sleep, I think maybe, a century or so ago, people got good sleep. It's because of the dawn of industrialization and living a very fast-paced life that we have drifted and moved away from that. And so all we're doing now as scientists is, how do we recapture the attention and the minds of the public to recenter the importance of living a healthy, wholesome lives? And we know that science is the vehicle and the avenue to kind of show and tell and to prove, to justify. So in as much as I'd love as a scientist to say, yes, we had all the answers and we helped, I think people were doing this previously. What we're doing now is understanding the science behind it, and in many ways kind of adding more nuance and personalization. So as you said, it doesn't work for everyone. So I know I'm not an 18-6 intermittent fasting person. It's just not going to work for me.
Right.
I'm a 12-12 guy, and I've seen, benefits of that already. And I think that's where science has provided a degree of evidence and objectivity and a bit of nuance as well.
Yeah. And something else that I'm really fascinated by with the work that you are doing, all of this, but also you're a big believer and proponent with your work of personalization of all of this. So everything that we're talking about right now is really kind of broad strokes and generalizations. Like, we know we could easily say, get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But when you really bring it down to the personal level, maybe it's 10 for one and 5 for another. Yes. I don't know. And everything else that we've talked about, how we eat, when we eat, how we sleep, how much time in REM and how much time in deep sleep, all very personal. And that is something I am going to keep an eye on, very close eye on with you.
Yes.
I'm going to keep tabs on you, doctor. And of course, I'm going to want you back on to talk about those updates. But for now, let's move on to something that, again, I found really fascinating. And I want everyone to know about this because it's a big step, I believe. Yes. The American Heart Association recently updated its checklist for measuring cardiovascular health. And sleep, finally, is now on that list.
Yes, finally.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, so this is really a credit to many of my colleagues and myself and others who have really done very great science and a bit of advocacy, not just the American Heart Association, but to legislature, policymakers and the like. I think it's critical. I think what they needed to see was, sufficient mounting evidence that was irrefutable, that sleep is inextricably tied to a wide variety of chronic health conditions, as well as some acute health conditions, and just general overall health and wellness. So just to be very clear, though, so I think we appreciate the American Heart Association, which is one of the largest. professional organizations, of which I'm a member, has put a flag down and said, yes, we believe in the importance of sleep. So, it's called Life's Essential 8. And we appreciate that. Would we like to go further because of the evidence that we've seen thus far? Absolutely. Because technically speaking, what they did agree to was sleep duration, which is getting 7 to 9 hours. But we know that someone getting 7 to 9 hours, means 7 to 9, not 7 to 9 hours, is very, idiosyncratic. And what do I mean by that? It's very personal.
Yes.
There's some people who could, get away with 6, and some people who may need more. And there might be some people for whom that because of life circumstance, they're unable to get that 7 to 9 hours. So I oftentimes give this story because I was raised by a single mom, going to school full time and working full time. And telling a single mom or a single dad or folks, doing shift work that they must get 7 to 9 hours and go to school and take care of 2-3 kids. That's very tough. It's a bit tone deaf on us scientifically, and particularly for your audience that they have either lived and led very busy lives, professional and personal lives. And oftentimes the one thing that has gotten shortchanged throughout their lives has been their sleep.
Yes.
And so how is it that you reprogram your bodies to say you need more sleep? And this is why we have a high rate of insomnia in the United States and globally. And insomnia, just for those people who are unfamiliar, is essentially marked by 3 key symptoms. The first of which is if the person has difficulty falling asleep, if the person has difficulty staying asleep or maintaining sleep throughout, or if the person has what we call early morning awakenings, or we call involuntary early morning awakenings, where they wake up 3 a.m. and they cannot go back to sleep. And so that's on the rise. And in many ways, we truly believe that that number is suppressed because we haven't done a good job in assessing the sleep disruption crisis that we have in the United States. And insomnia is not the only one. And I think for us, what we need to do, Barbara, is that we absolutely need to bring sleep issues to the fore. And so when American Heart Association endorsed sleep as a critical area, we're happy about that, but we need to go further because issues around sleep quality, sleep timing, the efficiency of your sleep, if you have a sleep disorder, these are other areas in the entire big picture of sleep that are significantly associated with poor health that go beyond sleep duration.
So poor sleep quality has, in fact, been linked to many serious health issues. What are the ones that women in midlife, do you think, need to really pay attention to, especially for women who are, either journeying through menopause? I mean, that brings its own bunch of issues, of sleep issues, as we know, night sweats and hot flashes continuing on through the night and so on. But what about for women who are, postmenopausal and just in that stage of life? Are there health issues that they should be really focused on?
Sure. So I'll start out first that there is a misunderstanding that as you age, you don't need, sufficient sleep, meaning 7 to 9 hours. And that is not the case, that you actually do. What typically occurs is that individuals who, as you age, that the portion or the region of your brain that is responsible for the onset of sleep, that is the one area of the brain that starts to show some decline in functioning. So when folks say, as you older, you need to get less sleep, that is not the case because you may be, in a situation where you're unable to sleep. And I mean that physiologically, meaning that if you go to bed at night, you can only get maybe 6.5 hours, and then you may end up napping during the day. And so the reason for that is because there is actually something physiologically occurring, not just in terms of the brain regions, but also hormonally, particularly the production of key hormones like melatonin, which is the one hormone that is, responsible for inducing sleep. And then that circadian rhythm and biology that I shared with you. So then this is where, as you age, the clocks start to get a little misaligned. And when you get older, that it is harder for you to get realigned. So when you're younger and your circadian biology goes off, it is easier for you to kind of get back. So for example, like a jet lag. If you get jet lag, it's easier for you to recuperate as you're younger. But when you're older, it is harder for your body to kind of get back in line.
Do we know why that is?
Well, I think it's just general kind of cell aging.
Okay.
It's just general cell aging because each cell has a clock. And so if your body's not replenishing new cells at the rapid rate that it used to when you're younger, then you are in many ways really, I'm trying to say this very sensitively, that in some ways that you are unable to really maintain the normal biological function that you had when you were younger.
Yes.
The reason why I had to be very sensitive, because I don't want people to hear me say or interpret my words that gives the appearance that aging is pathological. So I don't want people to see aging as abnormal or pathological. It's just a normal progression of the life course.
Thank you.
So, yeah, no problem. No, well, I know I've done many of these that, people can hang on to these small sound bites and said, Dr. Seixas said aging is pathological. I'm not saying that at all.
Yes.
To answer your question squarely, there are certain health issues that come about as a result. So as a result, your immune system is compromised.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have good immune functioning, then that can lead to a variety of different health conditions. It could lead to increased risk for autoimmune conditions and diseases. It can lead to poor metabolism, which can lead to increased risk for obesity.
Yep.
Particularly as you are older. It's the type of what we call obesity or adiposity, where you store certain fat in certain regions. As you get older, you start to store adipose and fat in regions that don't lend itself to good heart health.
Yep.
So you're more inclined to get diabetes. Exactly.
That's
I'm glad you're saying that.
A challenge, I should say, not an issue, a challenge for many women in midlife. Yep. Exactly.
And so when women at this stage of their lives, when they may be exercising and they may, exercise previously for 30 minutes and they would see certain benefits, and now they're doing it older and they're not seeing the same benefits. It's because of those things. But sleep can help to activate that. Sleep can, so getting good sleep can help to activate that. In terms of aging and brain functioning as well, as you age, it's important that in many ways, the beauty of the human being is that while other organs might deteriorate, your brain is one of the more resilient organs that we have. And so it's important that you sleep and provide it with the best exercise. And exercise, I would consider sleep as one of the activities to maintain the health of the brain.
That's a good way of looking at it. But you also need to exercise as well. I never thought of it that way. Thank you for that. That's great. Yes.
Absolutely. So that's how we have to see it like that. And I know previously what, you had asked, like, how can people get good sleep or good quality sleep? And I use the analogy of getting fit, right?
Yeah.
So you don't build up, endurance after one exercise. You build up endurance after a sequence of trainings.
Correct.
And consistent training. And sleep is like that.
Yeah.
In order for you to get to your deep sleep consistently, that you must be consistent. You're basically making your brain fit for sleep, or else the brain won't actually go into deep sleep. You know why? Because you just spent the majority of your life being an executive or being a homemaker or a mom or whomever, whatever,
or all of the above,
all of the above.
And taking care of aging parents and on and on and on. Yes.
So your brain never turns off.
Yes.
Your brain never turns off. You're always kind of in high alert. And so that can cause induced type of sleep problems and insomnia. And you don't want that. You want to ensure that you get the brain fit for sleep. And the only way you can get good sleep and maintain that and getting good deep sleep and the like, which is an indicator of good quality sleep, is that you just have to be consistent. You just have to get that.
Consistency is really key. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love talking about and writing about and nagging people about very lovingly, though, but nagging them nevertheless, is that really we have to tweak what we do and how we do it throughout our lives. So, you referenced something before. You said, like, maybe in the past you were doing 30 minutes of exercise and that's no longer working for you. Okay. So every few years, you need to kind of reassess, see where you are, what's working, what's not working, how's my sleep, how's my weight, how's my, belly fat, et cetera, and then tweak. And if you need, input from a medical expert, go for it. And that is so critical to me. I know I do that regularly. I would say every 5 years. And I really or if I feel that things are changing for me, if I'm not getting a good amount of sleep or the quality of sleep, which leads me to actually my next question. We haven't even gotten to the listener questions yet. This is my question. Like many people, I have an Apple Watch, okay? I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I think I measure every part of my body inside and out all day long. And so I do track my sleep with an app, a great app. And it really brings me a great deal of joy every day when I get a good quality reading. And I've had a good amount of deep sleep and the right amount, what I think of REM sleep, and so on. But also, like so many of us, I'm not sure how much of all these different stages of sleep I really need, me at this point in my life, in midlife. I'm not talking about someone who's 20, 30, or even 40. I'm talking about, 45, 50, and so on. Maybe it's different for us. I just don't know that answer. So let's first start by reviewing what are those different key stages of sleep, and then how much, based on your research, do you think women in midlife should be getting of each of those? And then I want to check to see how I'm doing.
I'm sure you're doing very well and very fine, Barbara. There are two primary phases of sleep. The first phase is called non-rapid eye movement. And the second is called rapid eye movement. Within non-rapid eye movement, there are 3 stages. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. I won't bore your audience in terms of
No, they're not bored by this. They love
Perfect.
all of this as much as I do. Trust me. Keep going.
Perfect. So stage 1 is essentially that stage of sleep when you are quasi-conscious and unconscious to your external environment. My wife calls me Z's. I call this Z's go to bed stage. Reason being. So we'll be watching a show and I'll drift off and she's like, seriously, you're not even watching the show? Did you see what happened? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I totally lied. I heard, but I wasn't fully conscious. So that's where, if you look at a polysomnography, which is a gold standard measurement of sleep, or if you have an actigraphy or an accelerometer watch, which is what essentially your Apple Watch or a Fitbit or whatever you use, that's essentially, they're using a kind of a byproduct technology from the polysomnography to test that based on movement. And they're able to call that light sleep, so to speak. And so you haven't really fallen asleep because that's very shallow. Your brain activity in many ways, instead of going up and down in someone is awake, like an ECG or an EKG, what this is showing is that those brain activities are slowing. Not fully slow, but they're slowing. Mm-hmm. Then you drift into stage 2. Stage 2 is marked with a deeper sense of sleep, but not your deepest sleep phase. And these are marked by some slowing but there are what we call K complexes or spindles that the brain emits. And essentially, the brain in and of itself is falling asleep, but occasionally it will have a spike. Maybe, it's as it's going into deeper sleep that there's some kind of brain activity that is being recorded. And then in stage 3 is the deepest sleep, and that is marked by what we call slow wave sleep. So when you look to your activity, that should really measure deep sleep. Now, sorry to burst everyone's bubble, that most of these wearable devices don't necessarily match up to the classical stages of stage 1, 2, and 3, which is why they can't say that in your graphs that you see.
Correct. It only shows REM or deep sleep.
Exactly. So then for stage 3, it's primarily deep sleep, so slow wave sleep. Here's why it's critical. Each of those stages are critical for a variety of different reasons. In stage 1, your extremities, like your hands and arms, that starts to become a little paralyzed. It starts to shut down. Your heart rate starts to slow a little, glucose levels slows, your respiratory rate and effort slows a little. And that's helpful because remember, as shared earlier, this is where the body gets to rest. This is where the body gets to restore itself. So the body is preparing for that, but the brain is still active. Stage 2 in the non-REM is as critical. And the reason why you have these K complexes, many K complexes or spindles, many people are associating that with this is when the brain starts to activate the clearance that we're talking about in washing the brain. So that's critical. So the brain itself is saying, wow, okay, Barbara is sleeping. Let me start sending some messages. Let me start sending some hormones. It's time to rest, right? And then your body then becomes more and more what I mean by depressed. And I don't mean that in terms of emotions,
right?
But everything just lowers.
Yes.
And then as you move into stage 3, which is slow wave sleep, that is where the brain activity is at its slowest. And that has been significantly associated with better health outcomes. So we are doing several studies where we're not even looking at sleep duration anymore, which is why I applaud the American Heart Association. But we are now looking at the amount of slow wave sleep and the amount of time you spend in slow wave sleep. That is linked to better health outcomes. So that is critical, right? So that's the non-rapid eye movement, right?
Okay.
Then you drift now into rapid eye movement. Rapid eye movement has primarily one stage. And in many ways, you're in rapid eye movement. I oftentimes, say this is like the Friday the 13th phase, right? Whereby someone's eyes, you look at them and it looks as if all you can see is the white in their eyes and it's like flickering. You're like, oh my goodness, this person's possessed. And no, they're not possessed. But that's when the person is in this rapid eye movement phase. And so many people say this is the phase where the brain really gets into action and the brain works like a computer and the brain starts to file the information. So as I said earlier, you are exposed to thousands upon thousands of experiences and stimuli throughout a given day, but you don't remember all of them. So your brain starts to go through the day because it kind of saves it temporarily, right? Just like your computer.
Yes.
It saves it temporarily. And then it says, okay, which of those are meaningful? Which ones were meaningful? And that's why it's going through. It's literally filing through. That's why you're having that rapid eye movement. It's filing through the different activities and experiences you had. Then it starts to connect the dots. And many people believe that's why we dream. Because, it's through that photographic piecing together that allows you to file, but also to stitch together and say, these are important. Okay, let me connect it with past memories to make meaning and sense of it. All of that, non-REM and REM, occurs in a 90-minute period. and then occurs several times throughout the given night.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, that is what, occurs with sleep. Now, the question is, how much is enough and what is
how
good
much
quality?
is really enough? Of the two I know they're all critical, but specifically of deep sleep and REM sleep.
I think it has to do with percentage. I'm not one of those folks that says you have to get a certain amount. And this is where, and I applaud you for being very on top of monitoring your sleep and the like. But oftentimes we cannot control how much. You see, this is
that
where...
That was my big question. Can we control it?
You see, this is where sleep is such a huge thing, because many of us appreciate the proliferation of wearable technology because it has made people more aware. But what it can do is that it can have a boomerang effect, whereby as people become more conscious about the quantification of their sleep, that there is an induced anxiety and stress associated with it, of which you can't have a significant amount of control. The only thing you have control over in your sleep is when you go to bed.
So the consistency factor.
It is a consistency factor that is critical.
Really critical to getting quality sleep, it sounds like.
It is, because here is the reasoning. And this is where I don't want to throw out the value of having self-reported information. Mm-hmm. So if someone were to say, I got 23%. I spent 23% of my entire sleep in deep sleep. Then based on average, when you look at the average numbers, that seems to be within the normal range. However, what if you ask that person, they got 23% of their sleep in deep sleep, but when you ask them, did you feel rested? Mm-hmm. It's very likely they say, no, I did not feel rested. And would you consider that to be good sleep? Because the person just said, I don't feel rested, right?
Right.
Even though the number objectively says that they do. So for me, my stance is always relying on a balance between objective and subjective readings of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a great answer, because that very often happens to me. Well, I'll look at my watch in the morning and I'll see that, it shows that I got a good amount of deep sleep and, an adequate amount of REM, and yet I still feel tired. And sometimes it works the other way around too.
Exactly.
Something that happened, and I know this is getting deep and personal, not personal in a bad way, but just like,
yes.
I ran the New York City Marathon last Sunday, and that's a grueling event. It's a lot of miles, and
it is
a big effort.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, it was a very hot and humid day for the New York City Marathon, so everyone kind of suffered through it quite a bit. But I was fascinated by the quality of sleep that I saw on my watch in the days after. It was terrible. Yes. Absolutely. Now, I would have thought it would have been the reverse. So I would have been so exercised and maybe so physically tired that it would have shown a deeper sleep. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. And I was really alarmed, of course, because I do measure, but I was surprised, really, just being very objective about it. Mm-hmm.
And of course, if those measurements are accurate and the like, I just need to say that. And for all intents and purposes, we're going to assume that those recordings and measurements are accurate. This is why I said we really need to focus on those 4 pillars: sleep, physical activity, diet, and stress management. Because unfortunately, what you went through, you stressed your body.
Yes.
You stressed your body, and your body is trying to compensate for that stress. And so this is why I said, it impacts your daily life. Sleep, in many ways, represents a third of what you do.
Yes, absolutely.
The other 2/3 you spend awake. But what I oftentimes tell people, what you do during the day affects your sleep, and what you do in your sleep affects your next day.
Yes, that is so perfectly said.
So, which is why we say start your day with sleep. Because if you start your day with sleep, meaning you see sleep as an investment, as that fuel for you to do what you want to do the next day, then people then will start to take sleep very seriously, to know that if you are going to be running a marathon, I don't know what your sleep was like before, but maybe one of those things that we could have shared with you, Barbara, is maybe you need to get a little bit more sleep to kind of build up some form of protection, because your body is going to go through a very stressful physical experience running the marathon.
Absolutely. And it's also a known fact that for most of us who run a marathon, the night before is never a good night's sleep, or not enough sleep anyway, because you're
anxious, worried and anxious and everything.
Well, especially when we change the clock at the same night.
I know that was horrible timing. That was horrible timing.
It's true every year, though. It was number 15 marathon for me, so I should be used to it by now. But yeah, it was an interesting thing for me. Again, very objectively looking at my my sleep, the quality afterward. But here are some questions that were sent in, because I did post on social media that I was going to be having this discussion with you today. And people did send me by email or left on social media some questions. So I'd like to get them to you, if that's okay. Here's one.
Perfect.
I often wake up at night and it's hard to get back to sleep when I do wake up. So should sleep aids like melatonin or Ambien be considered? Or what is the best way to handle this particular sleep issue?
Yeah, so thanks to your listener for sharing that. Not to pathologize again. So, this, conversation is not to diagnose or pathologize anyone. But that seems like potentially, if that individual is experiencing that consistently, they may want to see a sleep specialist, specifically a behavioral sleep specialist and a MD sleep specialist, because it's very likely that this is something that may have to do with a sleep disorder. And so they may need an intervention. I would not go ahead and self-medicate. So here are my views about melatonin supplements and the like. I have said this, and in earlier parts of my career, I have been a little bit more bullish about my concerns about the misuse and overuse of supplements. That has tempered slightly because I know people going through some real things. And so when people go ahead and one, admit that they have a sleep problem and they need help, that I would never want my concern to be seen as me being punitive or looking down on them. So I just want to clarify that.
Yes, understood.
So what I do know, though, Barbara, is that melatonin, if used, should be only used in specific circumstances. So, for example, someone who may have an issue with jet lag and they're traveling east or west on a long trip, that it can be used, but it must be supplemented with some behavioral modification. So, for example, ensuring that ensuring that the time that you go to bed is critical. So, for example, if you're flying to Europe or you're flying to Africa or you're flying to Australia, you're going east, that when you land, you want to ensure that you get good sunlight. Many people feel that they have to just go ahead and crash and go ahead and sleep because you're trying to maintain their circadian clock and biology to the time zone that they're coming from. And that's, you don't want to do that. So a combination of that strategic behavioral modification and maybe some melatonin with the help of a sleep specialist might be a good early intervention. What I don't want to recommend is that people go ahead and self-medicate and take a wide variety of different melatonin. So many people don't know this. I think I shared this when I was on NBC, I think 3-4 years ago. When you look at about 70 to 80% of the melatonin supplements out there, that they don't just have melatonin in them. Some of them have SSRIs, which are antidepressants, anti-anxiety types of stimulants. And the one thing I want people to be aware of is that the FDA does not make a determination or ruling on nutraceuticals because they are such. They're over-the-counter nutraceuticals. They're not medication. And so you don't have the vetting of these products by the FDA, and you don't know what people are putting into these. I'm not saying that these, companies have any ill will, but their job is to sell. And you want people to be addicted to these things. So not only are you getting the benefit of melatonin induction, but you are getting some dopamine stimulation, which is a key neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. And so that's where you have to be very careful. And this is why I've been very bullish and cautious around people taking melatonin on their own. And there have been studies that have shown that you don't need to take more than 3 milligrams. Why? Because your body naturally already produces melatonin.
It. Okay. Does that always happen, or is there any circumstance where people will stop making melatonin? Is that an age-related thing, or?
It could be an age-related thing, but it's rare. Okay. So, for example, your pineal gland, which is in your brain, which produces melatonin, can get calcified at times and does not necessarily produce the amount of melatonin that it needs to. And so only in those instances, but you're not going to know that until you do scans to be able to determine that, which is why you need, exactly. So my point is not to self-medicate, and Ambien as well. Obviously, you need a prescription in order to use Ambien. And my humble belief, and I might get in trouble with some of my clinician friends and colleagues, but many of our primary care providers, not just physicians, but nurses, practitioners, and PAs, that they don't have adequate training in sleep. However, they're able to still prescribe Ambien. The problem with many of these... I couldn't
agree more with you. I could not agree more with you on that. I think that they over-prescribe.
They over-prescribe.
Or too easily prescribe without really digging a little bit deeper, or recommending to the patient that they dig a little bit deeper with the proper medical expert.
Absolutely. But let me just underscore something, because this is a life and death thing too, by the way, Barbara. Many of these sleeping pills have what we call benzodiazepines at the chemical root. Those are some of the most addictive types of chemical stimulants in medications.
Yes.
And they are very hard to stop taking them. And as a result, people may go through significant withdrawal symptoms. And it's been, linked to, poor mental health and potential psychosis, suicidal ideation, and the like. So I say this very seriously, that people don't want to be popping pills, that there are other types of treatments, not just in terms of seeing a therapist, but there are these digital therapeutics, something that our lab and group are pushing, that you can go through a guided digital solution that can help to induce sleep, whether it be through virtual reality or augmented reality, or listening to stories and that are laced with different sound through audiology engineering that can induce sleep. There are other alternative solutions that don't have the same risk with taking medications.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know I have 2 daughters. They're both in their 20s now. At one point, my older daughter, when she was a teenager, she was going through a stage where she was having trouble falling asleep. And she did exactly that. She found an app with story. It was actually a storytelling app, and it really helped her so much. And luckily, she's, kind of aged out of that issue. So
great.
CBD products, somebody wants to know, do they work? What are your thoughts on CBD products?
So that's a good one. I've had this question several times because I know everyone is interested in it. I think there is not enough data out there. And the limited data that we have, to my understanding, and I could be wrong, I have not seen a systematic review. For your audience, a systematic review is when you look at hundreds of published data on a particular intervention like CBD, and you pull together a consensus from all these different studies that are done in different countries and the like. I have not seen that. Maybe there is one out there. My recommendation to your listeners and your audience is that if you're going to take CBD for sleep, that they should look at the literature. And one way of looking at the literature is to look for anything that's called a systematic review to see if you can trust that. I know anecdotally, some folks have shared with me that it has worked. And there's some other folks who have told me that it hasn't had the boost the boost effect of improving their sleep that they really wanted. So it really depends on the product itself and what goes into the product, similar to melatonin, and the person in terms of how they, react and respond to CBD. But unfortunately, I can't say too much because it's not really my line of work.
Yeah.
And primarily because there needs to be more research on that area. So
yes, I really agree. And again, it's all very personal, right? I mean, this is like what works for one person may not work for another, as with so many things. Magnesium. Any thoughts on magnesium?
Well, I think there's several things. I think magnesium, so when I was at NYU School of Medicine, one of my colleagues is a cardiologist and loves, sleep. And he has written books on, I think his name is Dr. Goodman, I believe. He's done some good work looking at magnesium. And here's a consensus that he and I have both reached, that in many ways, magnesium can have a potentially sedatory effect, particularly for individuals who are restless in their sleep. So they may have like a restless leg kick or something like that, or they may toss and turn or they feel uneasy. And there has been some evidence that shows that magnesium may help to address some of those issues. But in terms of magnesium inducing sleep, I can't unequivocally come out and say that. What we do know is that I just shared with you the potential sedatory effect that magnesium can have on certain bed type behaviors like restlessness and the like that can compromise someone's sleep.
Thank you for that. And I also know from some women who have started taking magnesium in midlife that it has been helpful, but again, very personalized, because it can also upset the stomachs of many women who have tried it too.
So that's what I was going to share as well. So it can have some heart health, benefits, but it really depends on what you take it with as well. Like how is it that you can get the most use of magnesium? Do you take it with orange juice or some other type of juice? So this is where you need to speak with a provider.
Yes.
To be able to learn how is it that you can best utilize this particular nutraceutical, which is how I consider vitamins and supplements.
And last question from a listener about naps. You did mention naps several times during our conversation, but I didn't get the sense of whether you felt that they're a good thing or a bad thing. And if they're a good thing, how long should they be?
My answers are never just yes and no. It depends. But here's what we do know based on the science, that you want to stay away from taking naps too close to your bedtime.
Yeah.
Why? Because your body goes through a process. Once you wake up, your thirst for sleep is at its lowest and your alertness is at its highest. Throughout that given day, as you go through different activities, that your thirst for sleep builds, your drive for sleep builds, and then your level of alertness diminishes over time. And so when you sleep, physiologically, when you start to feel tired, is when your drive for sleep is at its highest and your level of alertness is at its lowest. The key thing is that there's a point where the two cross, meaning your level of your drive for sleep and your level of alertness, where they cross. That typically occurs around 2 p.m. in the day. You want to ensure that you don't nap after that, because once you do that, you have then reduced your drive for sleep. So by the time you're ready to go ahead and sleep, you no longer have that drive to sleep, and then you're tossing and turning and in the bed and you're not able to go to sleep. So if you're going to nap, make sure you do it earlier in the day, not too close to your bedtime.
That's great. A great answer and very clear. I remember also, let me backtrack, the person who sent that in also wanted to know if taking a nap would help her kind of recapture some of the sleep that she had missed the day before or the week before. And I had read some research only about a month or two ago about how you really can't. Like if you think that you could be, not get enough sleep during the week because of work and life, but then on weekends, magically you get to sleep in, that you're going to reap the benefits of that? No. Is that true?
No, that is correct. That is correct. I think what, folks, it's a concept, called, if you have sleep debt, can you actually pay against that debt? And unfortunately, you cannot. No, that doesn't mean that people should go ahead and just say, you know what, I'm going to lose sleep. I can't make up for it anyways. Because the accumulation of poor sleep can cause significant stress on the body and can start to induce significant inflammatory reactions, which inflammatory reactions in your body are the precursor for poor health. So just want to, set that, clear as well. So unfortunately, a lot of research has shown that you are unable to make up from that sleep. However, there's another line of research that not many people are talking about. And I think it's actually very intuitive to us. It's not just about getting the sleep. So, and this is just, me, Azizi Seixas, saying this, because I think the literature and the science is still kind of building.
Yep.
So even though you can't make up your sleep, but rest is very critical as well. And so I would suggest that if you did not get adequate sleep the night before, that doesn't mean you should say, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to go on with my normal day. You should, but don't try and push your body to the limit.
Right. That's really good advice.
Instead, you should really focus on, okay, I may not be able to catch or recuperate this sleep. Instead, I can focus on my rest. So instead of maybe exercising too much or too long, you shorten that. Because remember, you're putting your body through stressful physiological experiences, and your body will produce inflammatory reactions that can create more cellular death and all these different types of things that can cause a cascade effect that can lead to poor health. Instead, you want to focus on rest. So for me, what I do, well, if I've gone through a night when I didn't get enough sleep, I take it easier. And this is why I'm saying this is not novel. If you talk to our grandparents, they would give us the same recommendation, but no, we have the science to provide truth and evidence to this, right?
That's right.
And so it's critical for us to ensure that how we go about doing our research and the recommendations that we provide to people, we oftentimes make recommendations that are attainable. We're not telling people to buy gadgets and to do this, no, I think healthcare is an equalizer. Yes. And for us as clinicians and scientists, we gotta make it simpler and easier for people to want to adhere to these recommendations and not to overwhelm them to a certain point where they feel that if I don't have this resource, then I can't lead a healthy life. Our healthcare system is already messed up like that. So we don't need to add, we don't need to add that to the mix. And I think for us, our message for sleep and sleep health is the fact that you want to be very smart about the choices that you make. You want to invest in sleep. Sleep is an investment. Sleep is your superpower. Even though you might be older, but you still have a lot to give. And as I said, the brain is one of the most resilient organs. So you have a lot to learn. You can still learn. You can still do more. You can still contribute significantly to society. But in order for you to maintain your cognitive performance and physical performance, that sleep is that one area that helps you to do that. And so that's one of the take-home messages that I'd like to share with your audience.
Thank you so much for that. And we are definitely going to have you come back. If you could carve out some time and if we can drag you away from your lab and your research again, because we didn't get to all of the listener questions. And I know because of this conversation, I have more questions for you. So you will come back. Will you promise?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know where to find me.
Absolutely. This was such an important conversation because I know that most people just have not been giving sleep the attention it so clearly deserves. And we now know that sleep is truly, well, no longer the third pillar of good health, but the fourth pillar, actually the first pillar of four. Let's say it that way. First pillar of four. Yes, that's our new mantra.
Yes, I love that.
So, Dr. Seixas, before we say goodbye, please just maybe to give us one key tip that you want everyone to remember. They're going to turn this off now. And what do you want them to remember? To make it a priority, or what is it?
I think start your day with sleep. I'm going to double down on that. I know it may seem confusing, but what I am saying is, if you see sleep as an investment and you want to conquer the world the next day, that the only way you can do that is to get a good night's sleep the day before. And it's critical because it will pay dividends. You will be more alert. You will feel like a superhuman. I'm telling you. So I would really emphasize, start your day with sleep. Don't see it as the last thing you do because it's often likely that you're going to shortchange it. So you have to start your day with sleep because that is critical.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything that you are doing. So we're looking forward to having you come back.
Oh, thank you so much. And really congratulations on all your phenomenal work. And, thank you so much. You are the credible messenger. Boring scientists and clinicians like me, no one wants to hear me, but they want to hear you. So thank you for allowing me to share this space with you so that we can spread the good news to your audience.
Together. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. All right. We'll be talking soon.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye now. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Gruff Talk, please do two things. First, share it with all your friends and family, and subscribe to Gruff Talk wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.